We have time for some more questions. So the next question, could you hold your pause, please, will be from Anna Rao, and we'll go to Senator Walsh.
Senator Walsh, in the wake of the scandals at the Veterans Administration, the Senate has passed a bill allowing for more doctor hiring and for veterans to seek care outside the VA if the wait times are too long. Do you support the concept of the VA as a government-run healthcare system? And if so, how would you fix it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm appalled of the problems that our VA system is having to provide health care for our men and women who have served this country. We have, here in the state of Montana, over 100,000 veterans who are willing to sign their name on the line and give their life for this country. And when they come home, they should be awarded or receive the health care that they deserve. So I'm appalled that the VA, the President, the Congress, Veterans Affairs have failed the men and women who have served this country. You know, Congressman Daines doesn't understand that we've had over 2 million men and women have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. He had the opportunity to provide the funding, additional funding that was needed to help the VA system out. Congressman Daines voted no on a bipartisan budget agreement, and he voted no because it didn't cut far enough. If he wanted it to cut far enough, that would have cut even additional funds out of the VA system. You know, just this week, the Senate passed a bill that is going to allow our veterans to seek care in the private sector. I support that, but there's a piece of in that legislation that I provided in there, and it's going to have a committee that is put together from outside of the Department of Veterans Affairs that will look at the problems within the VA. Changing the Secretary of the VA is not going to solve the problem. It's a big bureaucracy. We need to take a look at how we can solve these problems so that the men and women who have served this country, the men and women who are willing to put their lives on this line for this country, receive the health care that they deserve.
Congressman Daines, your answer?
So I travel around the state. Recently, I was in Helena meeting with a group of veterans. It was a Vietnam veteran, had been exposed to Agent Orange. They found a spot on his lung. They did a CAT scan on it. And the VA said, they read the CAT scan. In January, they found the spot. They said, can you come back in September for your next appointment? When I heard stories like that, I said, it is time to change up what's going on in Washington. I was one of the first members on either the House or the Senate that called for Secretary Shinseka's resignation. I got out in front of that. That's what leadership's about. John called for the Secretary's resignation the day before he actually resigned. That was 3 weeks later. Then we moved on action, and I agree that it's more than just taking out the leadership and changing it. As a son of a Marine, leadership starts at the top. Then we passed 2 bills in the House, the VA Accountability Act, which says we should not be allowing the VA executives to get these bonuses while veterans are dying right now waiting for care across this country. Number 2, we passed a bill that said if a veteran lives 40 miles or more away from a facility, they can go to another facility closer to them at VA expense. They can choose. It gives the veteran choice. And second, if the appointment is scheduled beyond 14 days, they can go to another facility so they get immediate care. That's action, that's leadership to take care of this outrageous situation going on in the VA.
Mr. Roots, your answer?
The VA system is socialized health care, and it's indicative of what happens to socialized health care whenever you create it. And that's true all over the world. I often have conversations with people who point to some place and they tell me, well, that's great health care over there, some other country. Great system over there. And they frequently point to one of the wealthier Western countries, France sometimes. They'll point to Canada sometimes. But when you go and look at what really happens there, you find that, well, it's actually more expensive. There are wait times. You've got to stand in line. Everything is not as good as it has been pointed out to be. And by the way, those are the best systems. Go to the worst systems. Virtually every country in the world has some kind of socialized health care. North Korea has socialized health care. There are horrible systems out there. The VA, by the way, I believe the budget of the VA has tripled. How many of you knew that the Veterans Administration Department is, I believe, the second largest department in the federal government by spending? We are spending so much on that. It's unbelievable what is spent, and it's tripled in just a few recent years. And it's indicative of what happens when you put government in charge of health care. If we unleash the power of capitalism on health care, we'd live to be 300 years old.
Senator Walsh, a response?
Well, a couple of things. The legislation that was passed in the United States Senate this week was passed by bipartisan support, members from both sides of the aisle coming together. And I'm proud to be part of that, bringing people together to solve a problem for our veterans. Like I mentioned earlier, there's only 2 veterans serving in the United States Senate, myself and Senator John McCain. And one of the reasons that this bill passed, because there was a veteran in the United States Senate pushing for this type of action, that we look out for our veterans in the Senate. So another piece of legislation that I've introduced is the Suicide Prevention Act for America's veterans. Today, we're losing 22 veterans a day to suicide because we don't have enough health care providers to deal with the PTSD and the issues that are coming back, that when our soldiers are coming back. And in the Senate, that has bipartisan support. Both Democrats and Republicans are on board to support that piece of legislation. But the one person who hasn't signed on to support that legislation is our own Congressman Steve Daines. So I would ask Steve to support that piece of legislation.
Congressman Daines, your response?
You know, I was visiting with the MP unit getting ready to deploy out of Belgrade. It was going to be one of the last missions there over to Afghanistan earlier this year. And I voted against the Ryan Murray budget. I'll tell you why. Because it worked to balance the budget on the backs of veteran pensions. John supported that. And these veterans came to me and said, Steve, how can Congress work to balance the budget here on the backs of veteran pensions? I said, that's unacceptable. I voted no. And we got that fixed. We got that fixed about 3 weeks later. So I'm always going to stand with veterans. As a son of a veteran, Dad taught me of service and sacrifice, and also the importance of making sure we keep our promises to our veterans.
Mr. Roots, your response?
I would just point out, any of you who want to read up on the Veterans Hospital situation, there are certain things where they can argue they were the first to do an open heart transplant. The Veterans Hospitals, remember, there are many of them. And so they have several claims that they did this or that thing first. There's a few pioneering things that they did. But compared to what would have happened if that same system was privatized, if we had the private sector working on that, it's not even close. The private sector would come in, do things much cheaper. You'd see people heal faster. You'd see all kinds of innovation and invention. We'd be so healthy we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. We'd be as fit as Lance Armstrong. We'd be walking around built like Arnold Schwarzenegger.